Hey guys, so this one's gonna be kind of a ramble today, just to warn you, but what I'm gonna talk about is the 1625 progression and look at different abstract applications and just point out some interesting things about this progression and ways that you can think about it. And I'm also gonna show you specifically two examples of linear lines today that are lines that you could use over a 1625 progression, but also use in other situations too. We're gonna talk about it. And also with these lines, I might make a couple of points about the phrasing of these lines, in particular the contour and why that is an important thing to consider when you're, playing lines. All right. So to start, I'll say that in my opinion, I think that the 1625 progression is one of the greatest chord progressions of all time. And obviously, it's really common and found in lots of genres of music and has lots of different variations and flavors to it. But the reason why I think it's so great is because when you really think about all chord progressions that exist in nature, all possible harmonic possibilities and paths and whatnot, it doesn't matter if the stuff is diatonic and traditional sounding, or if it's more like non-functional or obscure harmony. Bottom line is, assuming we're talking about music that is generally accepted to be musical or just generally sounds good, even if it's not your taste, the thing that it all has in common is that the chords move in a way that create tension and release. And the way it sounds to our ears, it sounds very natural to our ears because this harmonic progression through time, it exists with a duality where you have a harmonic comfort zone basically, which is basically like your tonic center, and like it progresses to more and more tense areas where it kind of wants to relate or resolve back to the tonic. A good metaphor to kind of help you understand this is, even if you just think about life in general, how you have a duality to the way you live your life. Think about your home. When you're at home, you can fulfill all your physiological needs most of the time. Like you can feed yourself, you can go to the bathroom, you can clean yourself, you can sleep, you can rest, you can indulge in comfort. Okay, so obviously we need that. But when you are there too long and you got everything you need, then you kind of feel like you want to expend energy and you want to go outside and do things in life and basically, interact with the world, expend your energy. But obviously you can't do that all the time because then you wear out, so you got to go back to the house and sort of recharge, if you will. All right, so in a weird sort of way, I think that is almost like the same thing that is going on with harmony, the way chords move from one to the other. And obviously, the way any given piece of music does this is what makes that music unique. All right, so the 1625 progression, I kind of think, is the quintessential representation of this point that I just made because, first of all, it's diatonic, and today we're going to do everything in the key of B flat, so a very basic diatonic 1625 progression: B flat major, G minor, C minor, F7, B flat. Okay, so most of us should know that. So, um, now it's also a cycle progression, and that's like when you jump to a certain point in the key and you work your way back through the cycle to the tonic again. And the 1625, I think, is a good example of that because the chord that it actually jumps to, the 6, if you look at the 6th chord in relationship to 1, traditionally, it's the relative minor, and this is like the major. And relative minor and major obviously are almost the same chord, they're very similar. But it's also a different chord. So when it goes from 1 to 6, it still has that sound where it's creating motion, but it still retains the familiarity from the first chord. So I think that going to the 6 is a good sound because it's just very smoothly taking you away and starting that sort of harmonic path that we're on, if you will. And then once you're at the 6, it moves through the cycle, and you're basically just moving like 5 to 1, 5 to 1 type cadence through diatonic fourths. All right, and we're all familiar with that in most traditional music. Our ears naturally hear chords moving through that interval, so it just sounds good. And as you go through the chords, as you get more and more further away, they create more and more tension until you get to the 5, which wants to resolve the most to the 1 again. So, and another good thing about this cycle progression is the fact that it has 4 chords. I think that 4 is a really good number when it comes to looking at chord progressions because A lot of times when I'm thinking about harmonic stuff, I tend to think in terms of small, like 4 chord fragments, in terms of creating exactly what we're talking about here, like these little tension release harmonic journeys that things, they basically start from the tonic, and it doesn't always have to come back to the beginning, but most of these chord progressions, they have the tendency to be easily loopable because the fourth chord wants to resolve or could easily resolve back to the first one. All right, so they're like these little harmonic pockets that can be inserted in time. All right, and this is important to understand because one of the other things I want to point out here is, if you look at how you can approach soloing over a 1-6-2-5 progression, obviously you can take the classic bebop approach, which basically means making a conscious effort to outline each individual chord change that happens. But you can also obviously say that one approach to soloing over this 1-6-2-5 is, if I wanted to, I can just think B flat major scale for the whole thing, since this is a diatonic chord progression. So if I have this progression, okay, the only thing that wasn't diatonic was that last passing tone, and it works. Okay, so basically what you're saying there is it's okay to play one chord or scale or sound over a series of chord changes, because the chords are changing 1-6-2-5. So if that's true, then you can theoretically say that the opposite is true, and even though it's like the opposite, it's essentially the same thing, which is basically that it's also okay sometimes to play a series of chord changes or imply them through your soloing over one chord or scale or key or sound, whatever you want to call it. So the opposite is true. So say we had just a B flat major, or how about like a B flat 7 jam, where it was just staying on that chord. If we're playing lines over it, we can play 1-6-2-5 type lines. And basically it's like you're thinking about it like if this is your B flat, B flat, B flat through time, it's just sort of going through this little harmonic pocket at certain points, but it's still like its exit and entry path is the same, which is that B flat. So it's okay to sort of insert these little harmonic pockets. Okay, it's still justifiable as everything's still being in harmony essentially, even if the rhythm section isn't playing those chords or whatever. And the opposite is true too. Like, okay, so hopefully you get the point. So look at the examples now. So I'm going to show you 2 lines that have a little bit of some sort of modern, advanced type approach to them. And as far as the phrasing goes, the interesting thing about both these lines is that they have smooth, constant contour in them. Basically, when we think about the contour, it's like the way the notes move up and down. And a lot of you know this stuff, but sometimes, I don't know, it's good to think about this stuff more, where you should theoretically be able to do this, okay? From an exercise point of view, say we take this 1-6-2-5 progression. These aren't the examples, but there's 2 things to begin with that you should theoretically be able to do to really maximize your musicianship with this. The first one would be with arpeggios. You should be able to do something like this. Okay, and basically when you go up 1, the line still continues that contour going up. And then the only time you change is when you get to the top of the position, or here, you're just at the top. Okay, so you see what I mean by constant contour? A lot of people do things where they might do more like... That stuff is great too, but it's not really keeping a constant contour. Just going up to the next available note. Okay, and then the other thing would be doing the same thing but with scales, where each chord you're playing the chord scale and going up to the next closest note in it. So, okay, so stuff like that. So those 2 things alone, just doing that or being able to do that theoretically to just different chord progressions, that will start a good foundation for this type of stuff. But obviously in a real playing scenario, you can mix and match these types of things. You can also use different passing tones. But the commonality is that you want to be able to play a lot of times in ways where you have a consistent contour through your lines. Because the thing that makes this difficult is when you're applying this to chord changes. Because a lot of times when chords change, you tend to go to a familiar part of the neck. Alright, so let's go into the first line. So the first line is still actually just a regular 1-6-2-5 in terms of the chords that I'm going to be outlining. We can still think of, for now, outlining the same chords. And this sort of concept that I'm using in this line is cool because basically I'm going to be pulling from different melodic minor scales for each one of these chords. The second one could be thought of as more harmonic minor, but it's very closely related to melodic minor. So the line, just to play it first. Okay, so for the B flat, I'm playing this. And that basically is just an ascending B flat Lydian dominant scale, the first 4 notes. Alright, and that, we're going to relate all these to the parent melodic minor scales. That comes from F melodic minor. And just so you know, the Lydian dominant scale is a good choice to use in a scenario where the dominant chord is, because we're turning it into a B flat 7, it's functioning more of like a tonic dominant sound. It's a good scale choice for that. So we're going to take this sort of linear or this smooth contour concept, but we're taking the scale approach to it. And then the next 4 notes, so that's coming from the next scale. So what those notes are coming from is a G Phrygian dominant scale. Okay? And that relates obviously to C harmonic minor. Okay? And this is a good dominant sound with the flat 9 in it. This particular scale is a good choice to use over a dominant chord when it's functioning as like a 5-to-1 type thing, especially when the 1 is like a minor, because we're approaching a C minor. So it's a good choice for that. So far we have this. Alright, and then for the C, now we're going to play, what we're actually playing is a C minor major 7 arpeggio. So we can say that actually it's sort of indeterminate whether it comes from harmonic minor or melodic minor. So it's sort of ambiguous whether or not it's changing scales, but they're very similar anyway. But I think the thing that actually changes the sound here is, even though we're keeping the contour smooth, which is the whole point of continuing to go up, we're switching here from, we were playing scales and now we're playing arpeggios. So the first 2 are scales, then an arpeggio. Okay, so maybe that sort of changes the sound of it. And then for the F7, I'm playing basically an F sharp minor triad. Alright, and the way this works is it's basically coming from F sharp melodic minor. And the reason why that scale works in this F7 case is because the 7th mode of that would be like F altered dominant, or E sharp altered dominant, you might call it. So that F7 is functioning like an F7 altered chord, so that's why the F sharp melodic minor scale works over it. So that's where this F sharp minor is coming from. Alright, so that's the first one. Alright, so, and just to kind of go back to that point before, how I said we're using this over a 1-6-2-5 progression, but we can also use this if the chord progression was just B flat 7. It's just basically creating some, tension release within the harmony of your lines there, okay? So it's interchangeable. So now the next line, similar type of thing, but here we're going to actually start with a different chord progression, or see it as different, which ties into my whole sort of overall point to this whole video. So a chord that relates to B flat would be D minor, okay? So just to start right now, we're going to think more D minor instead of B flat, even though we're going to go back to B flat in a second. And the chord progression I have here is just a parallel minor 7 moving progression. Okay, so D minor, E minor, F minor, G minor. Okay, and same sort of concept as what we've been talking about this whole video. It's just, this is like your tonic zone, or your home zone here. So all you're doing is you're creating direction, and because they're parallel chords and they're moving in these nice sequential intervallic spaces or jumps, it sounds nice to our ears. And when we get to this, going back to this is a natural cadence because this is like a minor plagal cadence, minor 4 to minor tonic. Okay, so that's a smooth chord progression. All right, so try and really understand what I'm saying here is this 4-chord progression is sort of similar to the way the 1-6-2-5 is working, and that's the whole point of what I'm saying. The 1-6-2-5 is just sort of like the standard representation of this. So basically, the reason why I'm saying this is an interesting point to take is, in a weird sort of abstract way, you can technically say that as long as the first chord is the same tonic chord, or is a chord that relates to the same tonic chord as whatever 1-6-2-5 you have, any 4-chord sequence that you make can be thought of as an abstract substitution for the 1-6-2-5 because it's sort of resolving back to the same thing. It's just a different path of how it's taking to get back to the same place. Okay, so basically what I'm saying there is, since this D minor is very closely related to B flat major, this progression that we have right here can be a substitution for a, okay? And so this line, we're going to do the same contour thing, and again, it's just minor 7 arpeggios. We're basically, for the most part, going to keep smooth contour. D minor, now E minor. Now here what I'm going to do is I'm going to play A flat major 7, and that works because A flat major 7 is like the relative major of F minor 7, which is the chord we're going to next, so it's basically the same thing. And then I'm going to actually break up the contour here because I like the sounds. Instead of continuing to go down, I'm going to go up one, but come down to G minor 7 arpeggio. That would be the last one. So, sorry. Okay, so that's the second line. And even though we thought of outlining the changes D minor, E minor, F minor, G minor, all minor 7s, if we look at the way they relate to the 1-6-2-5, the D minor, that one's pretty standard over the B flat. You know, you got your 3rd, 5th, major 7, 9, so it's basically still a tonic chord. Then for the G7, I'm playing E minor, and this really just kind of relates, it's diatonic related, so it doesn't really create an altered sound here, but it's just part of like a G Mixolydian scale. Okay, then for the C minor 7, remember we played A flat major 7. This is a cool one, and that actually works pretty good because C minor and A flat major are chords that relate to one another and are very closely sounding. So that's actually a cool substitution to use over C minor 7. And then for the F7, we played G minor 7, and it's basically diatonic. Like if F7 is like the 5 chord, like G is like the 6 minor, so you're basically playing all those color tones in relationship to F7. Okay, so this line over 1-6-2-5, okay, and notice how it always resolves back to the B flat. Okay, so both these two lines that we had, you know, they're great, and you can use them, for example, in say like a rhythm changes context where the rhythm changes starts with 2 consecutive series of 1-6-2-5 progressions, you know, so you can use them back to back. You know, a little sloppy at the end, but I'm trying to also show you how the progression goes on. Okay, so hopefully, again, I hope that these lines you actually enjoy, so you can actually maybe apply them in your own playing, but hopefully, if you can sort of see my thinking behind all this, you can kind of come up with your own approaches where you're just kind of creating different 4-chord progressions. You know, can use them over the chords that you originally write them over. You can use them over 1-6-2-5s, and you can also use them over static chords where you're playing over 1 chord at a time. Remember, because it's always resolving to the same chord anyway, so like again, in the example of this, even if we're playing over like a D minor jam, it's always going to resolve back to that tonic. So it's okay to, again, insert these little harmonic pockets. So that one was a lot. It was kind of a ramble, but hopefully you got some good pieces of knowledge from it. So there it is.